ఏపీసీపీఐ సామాజిక మాధ్యమాల ప్రేక్షకులకు స్వాగతం సుస్వాగతం. నా పేరు షఫీ అహ్మద్. దేశ ప్రధానిగా నరేంద్ర మోడీ 6 ఏళ్ల పాలనా కాలంలో దేశంలోని ప్రజాస్వామిక వ్యవస్థల అస్తిత్వం ప్రమాద పంచం చేరుకుంది. భారత రాజ్యాంగానికి లోబడి ముందుకు సాగాల్సిన పాలనా వ్యవస్థ ఇష్టారాజ్యంగా వ్యవహరిస్తోంది. మోడీ సర్కారు పార్లమెంటరీ వ్యవస్థపై పట్టు సాధించేందుకు పావులు కదుపుతూ ఏకంగా పునాదు నుంచి తవ్వకాలు ప్రారంభించింది. రాజ్యాంగం నిర్దేశించిన మౌలిక సూత్రాలను బేఖాతరు చేస్తూ పాలనా వ్యవస్థ బరితెగించి వ్యవహరిస్తోంది. రాజ్యాంగ స్ఫూర్తికి విరుద్ధంగా గుట్టు చప్పుడు కాకుండా సాగుతున్న ప్రజాస్వామ్య వ్యవస్థల విధ్వంసం వైపు చర్చించేందుకు రాజ్యసభ సభ్యులు, సిపిఐ పోలిట్ బ్యూరో జాతీయ నేత వినయ్ విశ్వం సోషల్ మీడియా ప్లాట్ఫామ్ పై వచ్చున్నారు. వారితో ఈ అంశంపై ముఖాముఖి కార్యక్రమాన్ని ఇప్పుడు చూడబోతున్నారు. కామ్రేడ్ వినయ్ విశ్వం జీ, నమస్తే.
నమస్తే.
Please deliver your speech on this subject, democracy depletion, parliamentary destruction. Please.
Okay. My red salutes to all the comrades of Andhra Pradesh. I salute Comrade Shafi and Comrade Jamindar, who is facilitating this virtual address by the Andhra Pradesh State Council of the party. My relationship with the Andhra Pradesh party began from my student days when I was an AISF activist. It began in the early 70s. And no need to say that I have immense number of comrades and friends in every part of United Andhra, now in AP and Telangana. So whenever there is a possibility to come and meet or listen to any comrade from Andhra or Telangana, it is a matter of pleasure for a comrade like me. So I enjoy this meeting, though it is not physical but virtual, but I enjoy it. And I am so happy to be with you, even though for a very short span of time. I have in my memory now the faces of so many comrades who are the proud products of the soil of Andhra. That's why I tell you, as a communist from Kerala, we feel always happy to talk to or to interact with the comrades of the land of Telangana armed struggle. I don't take much of your time as an introduction because we have little time at our disposal. Before we start to touch upon the subject, I would like to make one or two small, very, very friendly, informal remarks, which I feel that I should tell you. As comrades, we should not hesitate to tell what we feel. Number one point is that as you are running the social media platform for the CPI State Council, those comrades should understand the basic structure of the party. For the CPI, there is no such a body as Politburo. Instead of Politburo, the party is having a secretariat, and that's the point to be remembered by the concerned comrades forever. Otherwise, those who listen to us and who know these details, they may feel that those who run this affair, they are almost ignorant about the party's structure. So I very humbly, with all politeness, point this out to you. My second point, that too is very, very informal, and that is this point. I always wonder why the comrades who hail from the great land of Telangana armed struggle, those communist comrades who have a great tradition with them, those comrades who have played a magnificent role in building up the party, why, when they address each other, why these comrades never address each other as comrades? Instead of comrade, they always use sir, sir, sir. And I feel so sad and sorry about that. More than once in many cadets meeting of the AIYF or AISF, I have told the comrades, the young comrades of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, that try to change this bad practice. You should tell it's a bad practice. Because in my understanding, Communist Party is a party which waged a heroic struggle to end all sort of star system, not only to end the Tsar rule in the Russia, but wherever there is this kind of a hierarchy in which some people are elevated to some heights and some people are down to a lower strata, and those in the lower strata are forced to call the upper strata are sir. In my humble opinion, it's a bureaucratic practice. It's the practice of the old system of the exploiting system, which the communists should not obey or practice anymore. So through this intervention, I, from my heart, with full of love and sincerity, appeal and request all the comrades, please try to forget this Tsar and try to address each other as comrades. It is a beautiful way of addressing. It's a beautiful term. It carries the meaning what we have in our mind and heart, and that will be sufficient. So I request you, don't call me a Tsar. I'm not a Tsar, I'm a comrade. So when we come to the subject, I should tell that India can be rightly be proud, and all Indians have the right to be proud that we are living in a democracy. Our democracy, of course, do have certain shortcomings, but irrespective of that shortcomings, democracy is the best available form of governance in the present day world. That's why the communists are committed to this political concept of democracy. They are committed to the social content of democracy. And they, throughout the world, stand for strengthening and expanding the meaning of democracy in the true sense. We remember what Lenin has told years back, or even before that. Marx himself has written that the role of the communists, the task of the communists, is to ensure the power of the working class and to expand and carry forward the struggle for democracy. That is the goal of the communists, according to our communist teachers like Marx and Engels and Lenin. So since those days, democracy is something very close to our hearts, and that's why we struggle for making this democracy a real democracy of the people. And that's why wherever democratic norms are violated, wherever democracy is under attack, wherever people's democratic rights are hindered, the communists feel annoyed. Not only annoyed, we feel angry over that, and we take it as a duty of ours to struggle for the gaining strength of democracy. That's why the subject is very vital for a communist. The Communist Party of India, since its inception, is committed to the cause of democracy. Of course, we had to follow different stages of our struggle. Our course of action were different from time to time, but always our goal was democracy. That means the people's power, the people's rule. It is for that goal, it is for that power of the people, our heroes waged a very valiant battle in Telangana. It is for that cause our working class under the red flag and the Communist Party did a very inspiring battle in Kerala, in Punnapura, Vayala, all over the world, all over India. Our struggles were so great and so committed, and our people, our comrades, our forefathers, they suffered a lot in the struggle for democracy. About democracy, the people all over the world celebrate a quotation uttered by none other than Abraham Lincoln. He told, democracy means for the people, by the people, and of the people. And that idea is really a worthy idea. For the people, by the people, and of the people. Communists understand the meaning of it. But communists do have a genuine question whether if that democracy being implemented in many countries, including India, they have the name of democracy. They have the shell of democracy. But inside that shell, is it really the power of the people? Is it really for the people, by the people, and of the people are being implemented? So what Lincoln has told years back, it has never been practiced in real terms in any bourgeois democracy. India is having a bourgeois democracy, and that's why that limitation is very much there. So yes, we remember that definition because in our experience, in our country, we witness or we suffer a sort of a government which is not of the people, not by the people, and not for the people. But the government of today is the government of the rich, by the rich, and for the rich. Where the people are forgotten. The people are ignored. The people are thrown to the backyards. And everything that they do, they may speak or they may use the name of the people, but in essence, in content, what they do is not for the people, but for the rich only. That's why we differ from this sort of a so-called democracy. When they undermine the basic concepts of democracy, and when they blindly follow the dictates of the super rich, both from inside the country and outside, these people, led by Narendra Modi, and Sangh Parivar, they forget the basic understanding and the goal of Indian Constitution itself. The Indian Constitution was very clear in adopting a parliamentary form of government, in declaring that India is a parliamentary democracy. It was not accidental. Never it was accidental. Our constitution and our concept of democracy and our system of parliamentary democracy, all that was evolved not from the blues, but from the decades-long and valiant freedom struggle of Indian people. For more than 190 years, the people of India fought against the foreign rule. From 1757 to 1947, our ancestors fought for the country's independence, to end the foreign rule. And throughout those struggles, even before the birth of the Congress Party, even before the birth of the Communist Party, the people had a dream in India, and that dream was people's power, which is nothing but democracy in the modern time. It is that democracy and that concept and yearning for democracy and people's power and the belief and the faith that the people are the supreme, that led to the birth of the Indian Constitution. And the Constitution is very clear about India's future as a democratic nation. There is no need to search all the pages of Indian Constitution. Even a glimpse over the preamble of the Constitution itself will tell us what our freedom struggle stood for and what the Indian Constitution stands for. You just remember that part in the preamble of the Constitution. That preamble in the first word itself begin like this: we, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, democratic, secular, socialist republic. Thus it begins. I repeat, we, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, democratic, secular, socialist republic. That idea, conceived in the preamble of the Constitution, is very meaningful and valid for our discussion today. Because the goal is very clear. It is secularism, it is democracy, it is national sovereignty, it is socialism. These are the goals of India. And these goals and this preamble and the Constitution as a whole is the child of a great struggle of the people. It is a child of the great Indian freedom struggle. From that struggle and from that accumulated knowledge and experience and understanding of that struggle and of the world and of Indian people, we accepted those views, those goals as our goals of India, of free India. Free India should be democratic. Free India should be secular. Free India should uphold national sovereignty. Free India should have a goal, and that goal is nothing but socialism. This is Indian Constitution, and that Constitution itself was adopted in a very symbolic manner. Everybody knows that it was drafted by a assembly, which is called the Constituent Assembly of India. For around 2 years, that assembly functioned to make this constitution. And that Constituent Assembly was a great house in which luminaries of law, stalwarts of freedom struggle, great sons and daughters of the Indian people, they were the members. Men of knowledge, men of experience, men of struggles, men of farsightedness. When I say not only men and women of farsightedness, they were the members, and they drafted this constitution. The symbolic part in that, the symbolic part is the following. The last part of the preamble, it says, hence, we draft this constitution, we adopt this constitution, and we pass this constitution and submit this constitution for ourselves. Not, they say, the Constituent Assembly of India, or the Prime Minister and the Cabinet of India, or anybody else. But we, the people of India, the concept is that we, the people of India, we drafted it, we adopt it, we pass it, and we give it to ourselves. Then comes the basic question. As per this constitution and this approach, who are the masters? Who are the masters? On that question, the constitution is very clear. No Prime Minister is the master. No cabinet are the masters. No MPs are the masters. None are the masters, but we, the people of India. We, the people of India. And we, the people of India, made this constitution. And every power in this country, every power, the power handled by Narendra Modi, the power handled by any big bureaucrats, the powers of the army, the powers of the president, every powers, all powers are given by the people, because the people made this constitution. It's the people's constitution. That is the concept. That is the symbolic greatness of this constitution and its preamble. But that greatness of this conception is thrown to the winds by the Indian ruling class all along. In 1950, 26th of January, this constitution came into being. From that day onwards, the ruling class and their political parties, they have thrown this great significance and the greatness of this concept of the constitution, and they forgot the people, and they ruled the country and are ruling the country according to their whims and fancies alone. That's why the people's wish, the people's desire, the people's will, all are not reflected in the activities of the government. There was a great debate in the Constituent Assembly during its formation days of the Constitution. And that debate was regarding the form of government in India, or free India. Whether that form of government should be parliamentary form of government or presidential form of government. parliamentary or presidential. That was the great debate. As you know, our constitution was trying to adopt so many ideas from different constitutions of different parts of the world. And it was a great exercise. And mainly, we were following the British parliamentary form of government, because our Constituent Assembly decided finally that our form of government should not be a presidential form of government, but should be a parliamentary form of government. That means Parliament is the supreme. That means every authority, including the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, are accountable to the Parliament. And what after all is Parliament? Parliament is the epitome of people's will. People's will, because they form the Parliament. They elect the members of the Parliament. All the members of the Parliament are the people's representatives. Only the people can elect a Parliament and Parliament members. And only from that Parliament members, a cabinet can evolve. And that government and cabinet can function only to such an extent till it has the confidence of the Parliament. Once the Parliament has no confidence on the government or the cabinet, it has to step down. So, the Parliament is supreme, and as the makers of the Parliament, the people are supreme. That was the concept. And that concept was because of this we the people idea. We the people and their parliaments, and a cabinet or a governance system which is duty bound to be answerable to the Parliament and to the parliaments, to the people of India. That is the idea behind the parliamentary democracy. For the president is not the supreme. The Prime Minister is not the supreme. The book of the Constitution says that supreme is the Parliament and supreme is the people. And you know, the pillars of the government, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. You know, often there happen clashes between these various pillars. Questions have arisen so many times whether executive can supersede the will of the Parliament, or judiciary can impose its will on the legislature or the executive. Of course, over the executive they can, but over the Parliament, even judiciary cannot impose what they like, because judiciary is supposed to interpret the laws, and the laws are made by the Parliament. Parliament is the law-making body, and that law-making body making the laws, and that laws are being interpreted by the judiciary. In that way also, the concept is very clear. The idea was very clear that people's power, parliamentary supremacy, that is the idea. So idea-wise, it is good. But in practical terms, what is happening around us? Our parliamentary system is constantly getting devaluated. Its core concepts are being attacked. Its basic values are getting eroded. That is the reality of today. That's why we the people are annoyed, and we the people are agitated against this state of affairs. My dear comrades, let us have a look at the composition of the Indian Parliament. The Parliament of today is a house of super rich, Kodipadigal. They rule the Indian Parliament now. Majority of the members are not from any ordinary backgrounds. Many of them are rich businessmen, owners of vast wealth, all sorts of wealth. And the Parliament of India, which is supposed to be the representative body of the people of India, has become the debating body of the super rich of India. And a large part of them are people accused in criminal cases. That's how the criminalization and control of the wealthy has become the face of Indian Parliament system. Indian Parliament was supposed to be the people's parliament, where the people's will and the people's desire and the people's dreams and aspirations are properly represented and properly taken forward. Instead of that, now we can see members of many bourgeois parties Is it okay?
Yeah, ma'am, it's okay. For me, okay. I'm hearing.
Okay. So, at present, Indian Parliament is having a composition of this kind of people who don't know the real pulse of Indian people. India is the country where vast majority of the people are still poor, are still having hunger. And India is a country where crores and crores of people are illiterate today. Even today, after 72 years of independence, they are illiterate today. And this is the country where crores and crores of young people are unemployed even today. This is a country where crores of people are even today houseless, no shelter for them, and no proper clothing for them. We saw them. We saw the real face of India during these days of COVID-19. The crores and crores of migrant laborers whose number nobody knows exactly. It may be something between 10 crores or 15 crores, somebody say. There is no register for them. Nobody knows their real situations. Even the number is also unknown. But their number may be in crores, maybe 15 or 10 crores, I don't know. Nobody knows. And we saw their plight during the COVID days. In search of food, they were forced to walk from their working place to their home villages, which is 2,000, 3,000 kilometers far away from the big cities, They were living in the slums. They have no houses there, no proper health care there, no proper food for them there, no system for their families or their children to study. And their country is India. Remember, when we talk about India, please remember those pieces of chapati scattered on the rail track of Aurangabad. And remember the dirty clothes, rags, which is the sole wealth of those people. Such an India is there. And that India is totally unknown to vast majority of the people's representatives. That hunger is not known to the MPs. That tragic lives of the people do not bother them. The anger and the yearning for a job of the unemployed youths. Majority of the Indian parliamentarians are not concerned about that, because most of them are concerned about their big bank balance, their banks, investments, their estates, their mines, their business purposes, and their dealings, their share markets, and their concerns are the primary concern of these people. And when such kind of people are the lawmakers, what can be the law? How can that law be justful to these people of the downtrodden? How that kind of a law made by this kind of people do justice to this kind of people who are the majority in India even today? That is a contradiction in the Indian parliamentary system and the Indian life reality that is there. And I can tell you, we, the left, may be very, very small in the Indian parliament today. Very small we are. But we can proudly say, right from the day one, the communists, our numbers varied there. Once upon a time, during the 50s and early 60s, we were having a bigger number there. Once we were the main opposition in the Indian parliament, and then we decreased. And now the communist movement, I should CPM together, the communists are having the least number of members in the Indian parliament, both in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. But I can tell you, comrades, emphatically I can tell you, but the communists, they are there, and communists are there, and communists will be there in the Indian parliament, big or small, but they are there always, always to represent the people of India, to raise their anguishes, to shout for their rights, and to prevent the government of the rich from attacking the rights of the people. We are there. That's why I can tell you, as a communist, we all can tell that the communists are the people who tried to make this parliament a real representative body of the people, where the people's aspirations are reflected. And that is the task of the communists in the parliament. I can remember and point out the names of great communists who are the greatest of the Indian parliamentarians. Many names are there. I don't want to mention any name because that's a big list of them. But now the communists of today, our numbers in the parliament may be very little, but we can boldly and proudly say that we are the followers of such a great tradition, and we are the torchbearers of that heritage of the great people. We are not great. Those who are in the parliament, we are not great people. We are all ordinary people. But we are committed to the communist ideology. So we are not ignorant about our duties. We know who we are and for what we are there. And following that footsteps of the great forefathers of the communist movement, with our little knowledge and little might, we try to raise the people's voice in the parliament as far as we can. It is not an individual task or duty. It's a collective duty and a task of the Communist Party. And Communist Party train its cadres in such a way that we are justful to what we say. The present dispensation in power, the BJP government, they have an ideological basement. BJP is not an ordinary political party. It's the political party built upon ideology, and that ideology is so much anti-people and so subservient to the rich of the country, and that ideology believes that Hitler is the role model. Germany is the real model for India. That is a different subject. If we look at so many steps being taken by the present government, we can very well understand that how closely they are following the footsteps of Hitler and Nazi Germany. It's a different topic, so I don't want to deviate from our topic. So that ideology, drawing its inspiration from the Hitler's Germany and the fascist ideology, has its own viewpoints on everything in social political life, on everything. On democracy also they have an approach. You know, many of the RSS ideological foundations are found in the two books written by Golwalkar, their ideologue, who was the second Sangchalak of the RSS, whom they always call as Guruji Golwalkar. Bunch of Thoughts is like a Bible for them. Then comes another book, that is We or Our Nationhood Defined. In these books, the RSS ideas find their roots. Even today, they draw inspiration from that thought process in the Bunch of Thoughts. And Bunch of Thoughts say that democracy is not an ideal form of government. That's the basic RSS understanding. Democracy is not an ideal form of government because it gives right to vote for everybody, each and everyone who are not fit enough to franchise their votes, who don't know the basis of the running of the government. So irrespective of their understanding and knowledge and their data of life on their social sector, giving voting power to everybody means democracy is a meaningless exercise. Thus says Goldwalker in Bunch of Thoughts. In the heart of hearts, this is the feeling of RSS, BJP throughout India towards democracy. Out of their compulsions, they may do lip service for democracy. But in their faith and conviction, they believe that democracy is useless and democracy is foolish. And that basic ideological hatred towards democracy is there in the blood of the RSS. That's why, under their rule, parliamentary democracy and its great ethos and traditions and its great values are always under attack, a threat, because that has to be replaced by something else. Where a supreme leader, maybe in the form of a president or something else, but a supreme leader like the one which they had in Germany in the form of Hitler, such a supreme leader, and under his command, a set of people to govern the country, to dictate the terms to the people, and to do whatever they like. That is what they even today cherish and nourish in their mind of mind. So for them, democracy is an unnecessary bondage for them. They don't want to strengthen it, and they don't want to expand its foundation in the country. That's why we can say that democracy is under attack in India, not only from outside, from inside also, it is under attack. You look at the number of legislations that they initiate and pilot in the parliament today. Many of their legislations are contrary to the people's will. Many of their bills and acts are not for the people, are not of the people, are not by the people. It is to suit the goals of a fascistic government in the ultimate, which tried to impose a Hindu Rashtra over secular India. Hindu Rashtra never means the Rashtra of all the Hindus. Even though they call Hindu Rashtra in their basic understanding, it is the rule of the Chaturvarnya, the rule of the Brahmin, Kshatriya combined. And such a Rashtra is their concept. They dream for that. They stand for that. And for them, democracy in which everyone has a right to vote itself is a hindrance. All the poor, the Dalits, the Adivasis, the minorities, all have a right, equal right of the same vote of Adanis and Ambanis, Tatas or Birlas, of Brahmins and Kshatriyas. The same value of a vote for the vote of a Dalit, for the vote of a Adivasi, for the vote of a minority citizen. Everything is equal. They don't like it. They may not be saying it in the open, but their dislike and anger and hatred towards this system of parliamentary democracy is there in their soul. That's why we can say today that parliamentary democracy is under attack, not only from outside, but very seriously from inside also. That's the challenge and threat of the day. You should understand that. Look at all their legislation. Take the case of the EAA, NRC, the most recent one. Of course, they could come and they could pass it because the numbers are such a huge number. Whatever they want to pass, they can pass it. There will be a debate in the House. For namesake, it is there. You can criticize, you can oppose. But whatever they want to impose upon the nation, they can do it with their mere strength of numbers. And that high-handedness and absolute disregard for the philosophy of the Indian Constitution and the constitutional values are seen inside the parliament, and Indian politics today is seeing and going through that challenge. While concluding, I would say, in parliamentary democracy, in defense of that system of governance, we should keep in mind that with all its weaknesses, there is something called constitutional philosophy for the people of India. Constitutional philosophy, the philosophy of the Constitution. What is it? Ideologically, that philosophy is for a secular, diversified India. Ideologically, that is the philosophy of the Indian Constitution. Economically, that philosophy says that the goal of the country is socialism. That means the divide between the rich and the poor should be eventually lessened and be ended. Socialism. Democracy, the supremacy for the people, irrespective of their caste, creed, or religion. And secularism is also a very important basic of the philosophy of the Indian Constitution. And that philosophy of the Indian Constitution itself is not digested by the ruling circles. The present day governments, led by Sangh Parivar and RSS, they believe that this constitutional philosophy is bogus and an unnecessary evil. That's why they are abruptly trying to do everything possible to weaken the constitution, unleash attack on India's secular fabric, India's composite culture, India's people's rights, and attack on the universities, attack on the knowledge centers, attack on the scientific temper, attack on the poor. The legal and legislative moods and movements for suppressing the labor rights all say that the government of today is taking a step contrary to the philosophy of Indian Constitution. So we believe that the people of India, we the people of India, who are the real custodians of Indian Constitution and the people's power, who gave the powers to everybody, they should come forward. They should come forward to define the Constitution, to defend the Indian parliamentary democracy, to defend India's secular fabric, to uphold democracy, to emphatically say that we stand for a future socialist India. For that, the people have to come united. And that unity, they try to undermine, unleashing all kind of communal offensive, casteist divides. They try to divide the people. It is the tactics of the fascists everywhere. They want to divide the people. Hitler did it. Mussolini also did it. Narendra Modi is also trying the same thing, to divide the people, to safeguard the interests of the rich and the caste hierarchy, the communal forces. And in this battle, we know the communists have a definite role to play, and we will fulfill that role. We will do whatever is possible from our side to unite the people and to defend the constitution.